One of the most challenging and fascinating features about money laundering is that it is constantly changing. Every day, criminals think of new ways to get their dirty money into and moved around the financial system. But how can we prevent it? And how do we know the signs to look out for? In today's video, we will be taking a look at what are red flags and why we have to be vigilant at all times to identify the risk. Hello and welcome to another KYC Lookup video where we bring you AML related content to help you enhance your knowledge in the fight against money laundering. Before diving into today's video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Oh, and don't forget to leave us a comment with any suggested topics you would like us to cover in the future. So, what is a red flag? The term red flag is a metaphor. It is generally used as a warning or a cause for concern that there is a problem with a certain situation. Red flags are not always what someone does. They can also be what someone does not do. In banking, the term red flag is used to highlight something that is not right and needs further investigation. Red flag indicators. During the lifespan of a relationship with a customer, as an analyst or relationship manager, you should always be aware of the following behaviours that indicate a customer might be undertaking money laundering or terrorist financing. We list some of the red flags or indicators to be aware of at the time of performing the initial onboarding of a new customer. The client contact is overly secretive or evasive about who is the actual underlying client. Uses an email address from a domain such as Hotmail, Gmail or Yahoo, for example, with an explanation that their business email address is not currently working. The person actually directing the operation is not one of the formal parties to the transaction or their representative. Unreasonable complex ownership structure with multiple layers across different jurisdictions. Other red flags at the onboarding stage can be: the client contact is reluctant to provide or refuses to provide information, data, and documents usually required in order to enable the transaction's execution. Provides false or counterfeited documentation. Cannot be found on the internet, or the website doesn't seem to fit with the client explanation of their product and services. An important part of red flags is being vigilant to where the funds or finance for the transaction is coming from. Some of the red flags around this area can be: a significant amount of private funding from an individual running a cash incentive business. The involvement of a third-party private funder without an apparent connection to the business or a legitimate explanation for their participation. A disproportionate amount of private funding or cash which is consistent with the socio-economic profile of the individuals involved. The finance is being provided by a lender other than a financial institution, with no logical explanation or economic justification. One thing to keep in mind is, red flag awareness is not just a one-time occurrence. Once the relationship is established, you should continue to look out for suspicious behaviours, such as unusual transactions or activities compared to their normal dealings, unjustified large cash deposits followed by large amount withdrawals, constant change of business addresses with no valid reason, little or no interest in price of fees of transactions, and customers who are evasive, nervous, or hostile at the time of being asked normal due diligence questions. The list mentioned is by no means exhaustive, and every situation must be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and against the background of the specific customer. What to do if you come across something suspicious? A red flag on its own is not an indication of money laundering. However, if you are suspicious about an activity or customer, you should raise this with your AML compliance officer or money laundering reporting officer, also known as a MLRO. As part of your submission in line with the internal suspicious process you may have to follow, you should provide as much detail as possible as to why you think the activity or customer is suspicious. Once submitted, You should not create a copy of the information, nor speak to colleagues or even your manager about the suspicious activity form, as this can raise unnecessary risk of tipping off, as we wouldn't know who could be involved. Once the MLRO receives your submission, he or she will notify you and start their investigation. At this stage, you may be contacted for further information. However, the MLRO will do their best to ascertain to whether there is an explanation to what happened or whether there remains a suspicion of money laundering or terrorist financing. As per the FATF Recommendation 20, if a financial institution suspects or has reasonable grounds to suspect that funds are the proceeds of criminal activity or are related to terrorist financing, it should be required by law to report promptly its suspicions to the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU. How to improve the assessment and identification of red flags. The identification of red flags should be a fundamental part of any AML program within a business. The most common ways to achieve this can be training, targeting specific client-facing personnel such as relationship managers, traders, salespeople, or anyone who has a touch point with customers. Speak up, giving employees the tools to express their opinions in a frank and open way, without the fear of being wrong or perceived as not knowing what they are doing. Culture. Probably the hardest one to achieve, but the most important one of any AML program to fully embed effectively. Is culture, meaning all employees, pushing in the same direction and having clear definition of their roles and responsibilities. Okay, so let's recap. A red flag is generally used as a warning or a cause for concern that there is a problem with a certain situation. Some of the red flags you may come across may be: the ownership structure is overly complicated when there is no legitimate or economic reason. Business transactions involve countries where there is a higher risk of money laundering and/or the funding of terrorism. The level of activity is not consistent with the firm's understanding of the client's business or level of legitimate income. However, as mentioned during this video, the mere presence of a red flag indicator is not necessarily a basis for suspicion of money laundering or terrorist financing, as a client may be able to provide a legitimate explanation. The prevention of being used for money laundering or terrorist financing purposes is not the role of one person. All employees, regardless of their role or grade, need to be vigilant and report any suspicious behaviour. Well, there you have it. A basic introduction to what are red flags and why we have to be vigilant at all times to identify the risk. Please tell us in the comments section what is your interpretation of a red flag and if you think companies do enough to educate their staff on them. Thank you for watching the video. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more amazing videos.